Today on RoxomTV News, the U.S. delays strikes on Iran, extends a deadline, and somehow still can't clearly explain who it's negotiating with, which is a bold strategy in the middle of a war. After 42 days of shutdown chaos, lawmakers finally fund Homeland Security at 2 in the morning because nothing says under control like running critical infrastructure on a last-minute overnight vote. Meta is laying off hundreds of employees while pouring $135 billion into AI to replace them. So if you were wondering how that transition was going, it's going exactly like that. Oh, and for the first time ever, a sitting president is putting his name directly on U.S. money because apparently branding doesn't stop at the campaign trail. I'm your host, Hank Hudson. Bitcoin is hovering around $69,000, and that brings us to our top story of the morning. So let's get into it. The United States is delaying potential strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure while still not clearly saying who it's even negotiating with. President Trump announced a new deadline for a deal. On Truth Social, he posted, "I'm pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th, 2026 at 8 p.m. He also said talks are ongoing and going very well, despite the fact that it remains unclear who those talks are actually with, given that several senior Iranian officials have been killed since the war began. And Iran continues to deny negotiations are happening at all. The Pentagon is developing options for what it calls a final blow, including sending up to 10,000 additional ground troops on top of the already 7,000 that are on the way, with a decision expected by sometime next week. Meanwhile, the UAE said it would join a multinational Hormuz security force to escort ships through the strait, becoming the first Gulf state to publicly commit. Brent crude is already pushing toward $110 a barrel and stocks are sliding, which tells you exactly how markets see this going. And this is what Operation Epic Fury has to show for us so far. So, going great. Now, after more than a month of shutdown chaos, the U.S. lawmakers finally moved to fund Homeland Security in the middle of the night. The Senate passed the DHA's funding by a unanimous voice vote at 2 in the morning. That funding covers TSA, the Coast Guard, FEMA, and the CISA, which means that the TSA agents should finally be getting paid and potentially ease the long lines travelers have been dealing with at airports. Meanwhile, ICE and Border Patrol are still left out, with Republicans planning to handle that separately through reconciliation, meaning the broader fight over border policy isn't going anywhere. The deal largely gave Democrats what they had been pushing for, and Republicans accepted it after running out of time, especially after Trump had earlier posted that he would order TSA workers to be paid immediately, weakening their leverage mid-negotiation. Now, the bill heads to the House for a vote, but the bigger picture is that core security operations were stuck in limbo for weeks, which is not exactly comforting when those are the agencies you rely on when something actually goes wrong. The Olympics are drawing a hard line on eligibility for women's events, and it's already sparking global pushback. The International Olympic Committee announced that starting with the 2028 Games, participation in the all-female categories will be limited to biological females, and athletes will be tested for the SRY gene using cheek swabs, saliva, or blood samples. The committee says the rule is about fairness, arguing it is absolutely clear that biological males should not compete in the female category. But the reaction has been far from unanimous. France's own Olympic Committee is already pushing back, warning that testing could violate national bioethics laws. And the scientist who discovered the SRY gene in 1990 has also criticized the policy, noting that it doesn't account for testosterone levels or how the body actually responds to them. You see, back in August, he said that mandatory genetic testing for women athletes is misguided. Now, so this now shifts from a sports rule into a legal and scientific fight that could play out well before 2028. And depending on how it lands, it could reshape not only Olympic competition, but how gender eligibility is defined across global athletics. Argentina's president built his brand on cleaning up corruption, and now he's dealing with allegations of his own. You see, new polling shows that President Javier Milei is losing ground, with approval ratings dropping nearly 5 points in March as multiple controversies begin to stack up. Now, a big part of that pressure is tied to his past promotion of the Libra cryptocurrency. You remember that, which surged and then collapsed, leaving investors with losses and triggering fraud complaints that are still very much unfolding. At the same time, leaked communications have reportedly linked Milei to a financier connected to the situation, while a separate issue involving a top aide's finances and use of government resources is adding fuel to the criticism. Layer that on top of ongoing economic strain, including low wages and unemployment, and what you get is a leader who campaigned as an outsider and is now facing the same trust questions he ran against, which becomes a real problem when voters are already feeling the squeeze in their day-to-day lives. All right, joining me to talk about this story and others, he's one of our good friends of the program, which means, of course, I'm talking about Fernando, the Bitcoin libertarian. Fernando, happy Friday. Thanks for joining us. I hear you're on the road over in Bangkok this morning, or I guess it'd be late this evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for having me again. And yes, I'm in Bangkok, Thailand. It's 1 hour earlier than Hong Kong, so now it's 10 p.m. here in
Oh.
Thailand. We are in the same day. Usually, when we are together, I'm on Saturday. No, I'm on Friday, still on Friday, and yes, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I got to say, Fernando, I'm a little disappointed. I always loved getting your thoughts from the future, but we'll take you on the same day because it's always a treat having you, no matter what day we actually get you. And I want to talk about this first story. And I know this one hits a little closer to where your original home is for you, as Argentina's president, Javier Milei, as you and I know, has built his reputation on being anti-corruption. But now he's facing criticism tied to that old cryptocurrency he previously promoted last year that shot up in value and then totally collapsed. So my question for you, Fernando, is when you see that, does this whole situation feel like a personal mistake to you from Javier Milei, or is this maybe something bigger? What are you making of that whole situation now that we're a year removed from it?
Well, for sure, it was a personal mistake of Milei. He shouldn't have tweeted that because he should have studied a little bit more what it's about, especially when you use your Twitter. And again, it was a mistake that he made, and people who invested on that coin lost money. But it's the people who enter in that Libra thing. They know
Mm-hmm.
what they were doing, the risk of they were doing on their investment. Nobody lost money. I don't know, pensionates on all people lost money on Libra. Only crypto
Mm-hmm.
decisions. So, but again, it was a mistake posting this from the presidential account. On the other side, of course, the opposition in Argentina took this case to on their own to criticize Milei, to criticize
Right.
what he's doing. Now, if you go on Argentina media, they are from 8 a.m. in the morning until 12 a.m. in the night talking about all the things on the government. When they were at the government, they really stole money. Don't forget that the former president and former vice president Cristina Kirchner is in
Mm-hmm.
jail or in house jail because she stole money from the government. So mistake what he did on this is a mistake. And again, I criticized on that when I saw that tweet.
Yeah.
I was super disappointed because I am a big supporter of Javier Milei on all the things what he's doing in Argentina. But yeah, anyways, it's a mistake, and now he has to deal with that.
Yeah, and it begs a bigger question, right? Like we saw a lot of people specifically within the Argentinian community lose money as a result of this. So after seeing how this played out, Fernando, do you think politicians should ever be promoting investments like this in the first place, or are we going to take from this and hopefully learn from this going forward?
No, I think that politicians should not post any investment, promote anything, because
Hmm.
they are politicians. They are not influencers. So I
Right.
disagree with a lot of things that Javier Milei does on his social media. But he was like this before being the president, and he's like this. So we cannot tell him do this or do that. He is still the same person he was before coming to the presidency. In my
Hmm.
case, if I were Argentinian president, I wouldn't manage the social media the same way that Milei does. I would not promote any kind of investment, even though now I am not the president of anything, and I get a lot of offers to promote shitcoins and all the things. and I don't promote it because I don't like it. So because but again, it's all Milei mistake. Again, I will say that this is a mistake, and the opposition pick up this mistake to keep fighting, because Milei is fighting with a big power in Argentina, is the political caste, and they are counterattacking. So when you are doing this fight, you need to go 100% clean. You need to be 100% clean, because any simple mistake, they will pick up and they will crush you. So they are evil. So that's the point.
Yeah, the internet certainly never forgets. And you mentioned that you are often offered the opportunity to promote these shit coins and stuff, but you're one of the good ones, so we know you don't do that, Fernando. But as we saw here in the United States, our own president created his own shit coin last year with the whole Trump coin. And we saw kind of a similar thing happen to what we saw with Libra a little bit. That thing was, I think, valued at its highest around 80 something dollars. And then they released Melania coin a day or two later, and Trump coin just plummeted. So my question for you, Fernando, is based on what we've seen in Argentina with President Javier Milei and the Libra coin, and what we've seen in America with Donald Trump and Trump coin, how similar do you think these two instances are? Do you feel like the Trump coin was the United States version of Libra coin, or are these fundamentally different things, you think?
Well, are a little bit different, because with the Trump coin was promoted the Trump person. Libra coin was a project from some shitcoiners from United States that used Milei to promote it. Are different, but at the end of the day, they are shitcoins, and all the shitcoins are the same. No matter if you put Libra coin or Trump coin or the Bitcoin libertarian coin, are all shitcoins. And my financial advice to the people is don't buy shitcoins. That's the period, no matter who promotes it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's good advice. If there's a Fernando the Bitcoin libertarian coin, though, I might be so inclined to pick up a couple of those. I got a feeling those might maintain their value better than that Trump coin, but we'll see. We'll see. And I want to get back to Milei here, Fernando, because what's interesting is, he kind of came up here. He was like anti-corruption. I'm going to cut through the crap. I'm going to save Argentina. And initially, his ratings were really good, right? But more recently, we've seen his approval ratings start to drop, while people in Argentina are dealing with a lot of problems right now. Low wages, unemployment, high inflation. So my question for you is, what do you think matters more to voters in Argentina right now? Is it a scandal like we're seeing with Milei, or is it actually the day-to-day financial situation that they're finding themselves in? Because things are looking pretty dire down there.
Yeah, for sure. If your country is doing good, if you have money, if you have job, the president can promote any coin that he wants or she wants, and nothing will happen. I think that Argentina, all the reforms that Milei is doing, all the macroeconomic adjustment that he's doing, most of the people on the microeconomics, they don't see the benefits, they don't feel the benefits. In my case, when I went to Argentina last year, I felt the stability. For me was great, because the previous time in 2022, I went to buy 1 kilo of meat, and then the following week the price was double. So in just 1 week. So last year was totally different, but I feel that some things were a little bit expensive because of the price adjustment, and the wages are not following that. And yeah, I can feel that people is not happy. But on the other side, fixing 100 years of economic disaster, it doesn't happen in 2 years. So that's the point. I can feel the people, and I agree with the people. If you feel that your personal economy is not doing good, you have right to argue to the president. But you need to understand that the change of 100 years of corruption, decay, bad policies cannot happen in 2 years.
Yeah.
On the other side, these polls usually are telling lies. Something happened last year. All the polls were telling that the president was gonna lose the midterms, and they won the midterms for like think 12 points on advantage. So probably usually these polls are used by the opposition to like probably make the people more angry
Yeah.
and try to take the government out of the government. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that is 100% true. Could be. Of course, I heard that people is not happy from my
Yeah.
mom or my brother, whatever. But also, these polls are not 100% true.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like everybody down there has a lot of things to be upset about right now. You said a kilo of meat now costs twice as much. And when you started that, I thought you were going to talk about a kilo of something else. And I'd be mad if that costs twice as much too. I mean, you're down in South America. And, one more thing I want to talk about here, as we mentioned briefly earlier, Milei kind of came into this as this politician whose whole image was built on being different from the system and fighting corruption, right? But now we see his own scandal. Do you feel like this in any way hits harder because of that? You have this politician who's come in who says he's going to be different, and then we see corruption from him too. Do you feel like this is hitting the Argentine people any harder because of what you thought he was, and now it kind of seems like maybe he is in fact more of the same you'd seen previously?
Yeah, the problem is that this act is not corruption. Like it's a tweet that he made for a private project that is
Right.
not. I don't support it. I would never do it. But on the other side, the previous government, they were stealing straight from the Argentinian treasury. So they
Okay.
will do some stuff with the public works, or they build roads and they put like 3-4 times the price that really cost, and they take the money. The previous government was taking money out of the people. Here, of course, it's not ethic what he did, but he is receiving money, if he received money from a private, not from the Argentinian people. So I don't justify what he did, but it's his own nature. Milei was like this always. Probably if I met him and I say, "Hey, Javier, I support you. Can you post an episode of my podcast in your Twitter?" And probably he does it because he's like
Yeah.
this. So that's the point. Of course,
Yeah.
I don't support this. I'm a supporter of Milei, and I'm not happy what did happen with Libra, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
It kind of begs the question, though, right? Like, it sounds like so the previous administration sounded really corrupt. You said they were literally stealing from the people, but then you have Milei come into place, and he's involved in this scandal. And while it might not be blatant corruption, like he didn't intend it to go this way, you kind of got to wonder too, like, it kind of screams to me a little bit of incompetence. And I don't know what's necessarily worse, having a government that's actively stealing from you that might be competent, or having somebody in there who's incompetent enough that he finds himself in this huge scandal from something as simple as a tweet. I don't know what the right answer is, but it's an interesting situation there in Argentina. And of course, we'll be keeping everyone up to date. It's always great to have your opinions on this one, Fernando, as we know you have a lot more at stake than I do when it comes to Argentina. With that being said, you and I are going to take a quick break. But when we're back, we've got more of this morning's top stories to talk about, including what's going on over in your home or your current home place of Hong Kong. So stay tuned. Fernando and I will be back with more top news stories right after this. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. If authorities can demand your passwords on the spot, well, your phone, it just became a liability. And over in Hong Kong, new rules are giving police the power to require individuals to unlock devices or provide technical assistance to access encrypted data during investigations. Great. Refusing to comply is now a criminal offense with potential fines and jail time, and the law applies broadly to all electronic devices, including phones, laptops, and any storage that could hold encrypted information. Authorities now have wider powers to seize and retain devices if they believe the data may be related to national security, which is defined broadly enough to give enforcement significant discretion over when and how this is applied. Now, that matters because this doesn't only affect residents, it applies to travelers too, foreign nationals, and anyone passing on through, meaning your personal data can become a point of legal pressure the moment you cross into the jurisdiction. And for Bitcoin users, this is where things kind of shift because Bitcoin changes the equation here, especially when access to assets isn't tied to a device you're physically carrying. Now, unlike traditional accounts or custodial platforms, we know Bitcoin can be secured in ways that aren't physically discoverable, and whether that's memorized seed phrases, distributed access, or setups that don't rely on a single point of control. So while laws like this can compel access to what's on your device, they can't compel access to something that isn't physically there, which raises a bigger question about what it actually means to control your data and your assets in a world where access can be demanded on command. We're bringing Fernando back. Fernando, I want to talk about what is going on in your place of residence in Hong Kong, because under these new rules, police can now require you to unlock your phone or give them passwords during an investigation. And if you refuse, you could get jail time. So when you hear that, does that feel like a reasonable security measure to you, or are they taking things a step or two too far? I'd love to get your beat.
Well, I discovered today, a friend of mine sent me a tweet. I just read the warning of the US Embassy that was telling the travelers that Hong Kong can do this. I think that is under the national security law. I'm not 100% into the news, but probably it's under the national security law. If they suspect something about you, if they suspect that you are doing something wrong, of course you will be forced to show them your phone and your data.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the police knows what a Bitcoin wallet is. And a real Bitcoiner knows a lot of ways to protect from that side, not only for the police, for the thieves, for whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Doing so, I think that probably is the same that happened in China. For example, when you go to China, they told you, oh, probably you need to show to the government, the police, that you are using VPN or whatever, because blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. And never happened to me. So
All
I
right.
think that probably they read the law and they found something that the law says, and potentially that they can force you to show your mobile phone or whatever. But I'm not
Mm-hmm.
scary on that. I think that all these things are probably, if you are targeted for some illegal activities or they suspect that you are doing something illegal, they will do to you. But I don't think that they will put all the people in line and make
Mm-hmm.
you unlock your phone and show how many Bitcoin you have, especially in a place where Bitcoin taxes are zero. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you have one Bitcoin or zero point 0.1 or 1 million Bitcoin,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit of like a slippery slope, though, no? Because it's like this applies not only to residents, but also travelers and people that are just passing through, meaning literally anyone entering Hong Kong could be subject to this. So, my question is like, does that in any way change how you think about digital privacy when you travel? I know you're always bopping around everywhere. Does that not concern you? I'd be concerned if I know that I go to Hong Kong and they can just say, hey, legally, open it all up. You don't know. I mean, there's so many hacks out there too. What if, because I worry about like if I was in Hong Kong, what if there's someone pretending to be a police officer and they say, hey, we need access to your phone, a couple keystrokes, and all of a sudden they send all my Bitcoin to them or something. So does that not concern you at all or make you think about privacy when you undergo all of your international travels? I'd be kind of worried.
Yeah, of course. I take a lot of measures when I travel,
Yeah.
or not only when I travel in my daily life. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
there, you need to take a lot of measures, and there are many, many different ways that you can be protected using multi-signature, using different wallets, using
Mm-hmm.
passphrases or whatever. So there are many ways to protect, and you need,
Mm-hmm.
and people must get protected of, or may take these measures, not
Yeah.
even if they are traveling. If they stay at home, they should take care of their security, because you can get your Bitcoin stolen anytime. So you can
Yeah.
receive an email saying, I don't know, there is a problem, and you log in there, and then they drain your wallet. So um, the security must be, there is a must when you are in Bitcoin for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. not only from what government can do to you, from
Hmm.
anyone. And of course, they can be these scams. For example, if someone comes to me and say, I'm a policeman, check your phone, I would know if he or she is a policeman because I live in Hong
Yeah.
Kong.
Well, you
But
might,
for
but a traveler might not.
that's the
I
point.
might
That's the
not.
point. That's the point. For a traveler, it's an issue. So there are many, many, many ways to get protected. I'm not gonna point them in public
Hmm.
because, but again, I encourage anyone who is on Bitcoin try to go and check. There are a lot of content created. For example, you have the guy BTC Sessions. He creates
Hmm.
a lot of content on the security side. He also has one-to-one consultation. I'm not promoting
Hmm.
him, but I
Yeah.
urge anyone to take care of the safety. Again,
Hmm.
not if you come to Hong Kong. If you are on the States and you don't leave your state, also you need to take care of your privacy and your security.
Yeah, and I think security is the name of the game. And specifically, what's kind of gave me a little pause when I heard about this story, Fernando, is the law itself is written broadly around the idea of national security, which essentially it sounds very something like we see here in America, because it essentially gives authorities a lot of discretion in terms of when they can actually use these powers. So, does that phrasing at all of national security, does that give you any kind of concern? Because it makes me feel like a police officer, for any reason they want, can just grab you and check out your phone, being like, oh, it's a matter of national security. And then legally, they're justified. So, is that kind of large blanket? We've seen it in the United States, kind of with a lot of the things that we've been happening here, specifically what was going on in Minnesota with ICE. They were just like, it's a national security issue, which allows them to do kind of whatever they want. So, does that phrasing at all concern you? Because to me, again, this feels like it could be a very slippery slope.
Yeah, the national security, the only concern that I have is that with the national security law, they can call you like you are a terrorist or whatever. They can
Hmm.
tag you as a terrorist if you probably say something that the government don't like, and probably you are now a target of getting your phone um, uh, investigated. So, but anyways,
Yeah.
if you use any public network, if you use any public Wi-Fi, probably you say, okay, I'm so scared of going to Hong Kong and cross the border and get the police checking my phone.
Hmm.
But probably then you go to a Starbucks and you use the public Wi-Fi of the Starbucks and you
Hmm.
don't use VPN. So again, for me, it's not a problem because I know how to take security measures since
Yeah.
many years ago. But for people, like they say, oh, yeah, yeah, I'm scared of going to China. But then they go to an Airbnb and they connect with the public Wi Fi without using VPN, or they go to Starbucks and they say, oh, nice. Or probably they are at the airport and they connect using the Wi Fi of the airport without the VPN or
Hmm.
without anything. So of course, it has a concern because they can target you as a terrorist and show me your phone. But
Hmm.
again, the governments cannot control you, cannot control anything,
Yeah,
everything.
they try.
They
They
try,
try.
but again, it's on your side to study and protect your privacy. That's the most
Yeah.
important thing. And this, I'm not saying the guys who cover the face or whatever. You can be a public person, but you need to do some stuff to protect your privacy or what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's becoming more and more important. And one last question before we go to break on this one, Fernando. We're seeing this happen in Hong Kong. And what I worry about is that maybe this is just the beginning, and we're going to start seeing these types of measures come up by other governments. Maybe the United States says, hey, it's a national security issue. We're allowed to grab your phone and do whatever we want with it. So, my question for you is, When we see this world where governments are starting to require access to our own personal devices like this, does that to you highlight the ever-growing importance of having control over your own assets and
Of
information in a way
course,
that isn't tied to something physical you're carrying, right? This kind of continues to push that Bitcoin narrative of self-sovereignty forward, right?
that's the main thing, because it's not probably you see this in Hong Kong, but all the governments do. So
Yeah.
all the governments spy you. In Europe, the exchange must report to the central authority how many Bitcoin you have, or how many transactions you did, or if you transfer your Bitcoin to your hot wallet. So that is what is triggering in France all the situation with the hijacks and the crimes against crypto holders. So again,
Hmm.
governments can control us, but if we take care and we protect ourselves and we study and we go into the rabbit hole, they will have more difficult to control us. So that's the
Love it.
thing. If they come
Yeah.
and see my phone, probably they will see pictures of food. So
You got pictures of food. Mine's a bunch of my cat. Like, have at it, guys. There'll be a real lot of fun. Food and cat pictures for you.
yeah.
All right, Fernando, you and I are going to take a quick break, but when we're back, we're going to be covering more of this morning's top stories, including President Donald Trump is looking to become the first sitting president to put his name directly on U.S. currency. Big surprise there. We'll be talking about that and more when we return right here at Roxom TV News. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Roxom TV News. Really quick, if you haven't already, make sure you do the thing, like, follow, and subscribe. You can find us on all the major platforms at Roxom TV and Roxom TV News. Let's get back into this morning's top stories, because the first time ever, a sitting president is about to put his name directly on U.S. money. Starting in June, paper currency will carry Donald Trump's signature as part of the country's 250th anniversary rollout. That means Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's names will replace the Treasurer of the United States on U.S. bills, ending a tradition that has been in place since 1861, when federal currency was first issued during the Civil War. Now, the change begins with the $100 bill and will eventually extend across all denominations, marking a pretty significant visual shift in something most people handle every day without really thinking about it. And while this might sound symbolic, money is one of the most persistent forms of national branding. So putting a sitting president's name on it blurs a line that has been intentionally left alone for over a century, which raises real questions about where that line ends up going next. Meta is laying off hundreds of employees while spending massive amounts of money to build the technology that may replace them. Across divisions like Reality Labs, Facebook recruiting, sales, and global operations, Meta cut several hundred roles this week, marking its second round of layoffs this year. At the same time, the company is investing $135 billion into AI infrastructure and confirmed a 5-year, $27 billion deal with Nebius to secure computing power for its next-generation models, structured as $12 billion of guarantees with a $15 billion backstop. Now, Zuckerberg has already said that work once done by large teams can now be handled by a single talented person. And what's happening here is that idea moving from theory into reality. And this comes as the company's shares dropped 7% after legal concerns over harm to young users added pressure. And when you combine that with the layoffs, it paints a pretty clear picture of where this is heading, which is fewer people doing more work, or more accurately, fewer people needed at all. A U.S. federal judge just stepped in and stopped the government from blacklisting an American AI company, and it did not mince words about it. The judge blocked the Pentagon's designation of Anthropic as a supply chain risk and halted Trump's order requiring all federal agencies to stop using its Claude system. You see, in the ruling, the judge called the moves Orwellian and arbitrary and capricious, saying they appeared designed to punish Anthropic after the company publicly criticized the Pentagon's contracting position. Now, the order will take effect in 7 days to allow time for an appeal, but the signal is already clear that the government cannot use national security labels as a workaround to sideline companies that it disagrees with. And in a moment where AI contracts are massive and competition is heating up fast, that matters because it means that companies can push back without immediately risking being cut out of billions of dollars in federal business. All right, I want to bring Fernando back for this one. Fernando, I want to talk about this Anthropic case here because the government tried to label it this AI company, as a national security risk after it publicly criticized them. And then the judge stepped in and called that move Orwellian, meaning it was overly controlling and punitive in a way that feels almost dystopian. So my question for you, Fernando, is when you hear this, does this strike you as a real security issue, or is this just government overreach and Trump doing his thing where he punishes those that tend to disagree with him? What was your read on this situation?
For sure, the second one, like Trump punishing, because what I heard at the beginning was not that they criticized, but I think that they wanted to use Anthropic for guns and for war. And Anthropic
Right.
said, no, we are not going to participate on that. So that's why they are
Mm-hmm.
punishing Anthropic. Yeah, for sure. For sure, it's Spanish, of course.
Yeah. And this, like you mentioned, this wasn't really about tech being dangerous. It was about the company pushing back on the Pentagon. So my question is, when you see that, does that make you any more concerned about how easily the government can just sideline companies it disagrees with? Because that seems like a big problem to me.
Yeah, of course. That's that. We were discussing about that a few minutes ago with the Hong Kong stuff. With this security law or national security issues, the government can say, okay, your company needs to do that because of the national security. And you say, I don't want to do that because probably you are a founder of a company that doesn't want to get involved into war. So you say, no, my AI is gonna be used for Pacific use, not for war. And Trump is going to say, okay, national security, we ban you, or we force you to do X or Y or Z. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the big dilemma of the governments.
Yeah. And from your perspective on this, Fernando, where do you think we should be drawing that line between legitimate national security concerns and what starts to look like censorship or retaliation, especially as something as powerful as AI? Like, where do you think that line is right now? Because it seems like we're kind of trying to figure that out in real time.
Yeah, on the other side, yeah, we are trying to figure it out on the real time because we don't know yet the power of AI and national security. And probably, let's say, if a
Hmm.
company is super big and has more power than the government with AI, with agents, with all this stuff, it's a problem of national security. But
Hmm.
again, we will discover this line on the road. But this case, I'm sure it's not a problem of national security. It's like a punishment because they didn't want to go into the Pentagon.
Yeah, yeah, no, Trump certainly likes to offer up punishment to those that disagree with him about anything. And zooming out though, because this kind of brings an interesting question, because Trump, as we've seen, kind of just does whatever he wants. Almost a lot of times it feels almost like he's unchecked. So this ruling is significant because does it in any way make you feel better about the checks and balances in the government actually working, or does it maybe make you feel more concerned that this situation even happened in the first place? Because it's nice to see that we do still have some checks on the president, but it does worry me that we're even having to use these. So where do you land on that? Do you feel a little more comforted that like checks and balances are doing their job right now?
Yes, but again, it raised the concern that a president must not be involved on what the private companies do.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. That's the main thing. Because on the other side, Trump criticized China because, of course, in China, when your company is big enough and when your company is involved into certain activities that compromise or are tactical for the government, of course, the government
Hmm.
you must give some shares and participation to the government. That's the point. It's not, but these are the rules. On the other side, Trump criticized that, but he wants us to do the same. So again, for me, the governments must not interfere the companies unless they are doing something that is proven that is attacking the national security. Let's say if Anthropic, they discover that is doing something with China or with some enemy country or whatever, this is national security. But saying no to the Pentagon, saying this is my company and I will run my company on my ethical perspectives,
right?
This is bullshit. So yeah,
Totally. Ethically and morally, they should be able to do whatever they want if they don't agree with the Pentagon without facing some kind of backlash. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's nice to see at least checks and balances are still working a little bit. But, you know, as we've seen with Trump, he will find a workaround for anything he wants. So I'll be curious to what the next chapter of this looks like, because I get a feeling it's not over anytime soon.
Yes.
All right, we're going to move on to our next story here, Fernando. So hang 10, I'm going to bring it back in just a second to chat about it, because the U.S. is now spending billions on war every week, while already sitting on $39 trillion in debt, and somehow that's not slowing any of this down. You see, over in the Middle East, the cost of the Iran war is accelerating fast, with the United States burning through $11.3 billion in the first 6 days alone. And now, just a few weeks in, that number has already crossed $20 billion and is expected to hit $25 billion within the next few days. At the same time, the human toll is rising as well, with reports of over 1,000 Iranian civilians killed, including 200 children, alongside 13 U.S. service members, making it clear this isn't some abstract geopolitical exercise. It's very real, very fast-moving, and very expensive. The Pentagon is now preparing to request more than $200 billion in additional funding to expand the war effort, which is already drawing pushback from Congress as lawmakers try to figure out how you fund something like that when the country is already deeply in debt. At scale, as a macro analyst Lynn Alden points out, that $200 billion comes out to roughly $1,500 per American household, which is where this starts to feel a lot less theoretical. And when you zoom in on how the money is actually being spent, the scale gets even harder to ignore, because the United States burned through $5.6 billion in munitions in just 2 days, with daily costs ranging from $500 million to over $1 billion, and sometimes hitting $1 to $2 billion during peak operations. A single Tomahawk missile, for example, can cost up to $5 million, and more than 300 of those were used early on, while defensive systems like Patriot and THAAD interceptors can cost anywhere from $3 to $15 million per shot, which creates this dynamic where relatively cheap threats force extremely expensive responses in real time. Now, let's zoom out, because this is where things get particularly interesting, since despite all of this spending, the United States doesn't need to have the money sitting there to pay for it. Instead, the Treasury issues debt. Markets absorb it, and when things tighten, the Federal Reserve steps in with liquidity, meaning wars today aren't paid for up front, they're financed and pushed into the future. As Lynn Alden puts it, war is expensive and thus leads to high sovereign debt levels. And high sovereign debt levels can also lead to war. And what that means in practice is that the cost doesn't show up as a single bill. It builds quietly over time through inflation, through wages that don't keep up, and through a steady erosion of purchasing power that most people feel but can't easily trace back to moments like this. Because the real cost of war shows up not just in missiles or defense budgets, but in everyday economy, in what your money buys and how far your paycheck stretches, and how much more expensive life becomes without a clear explanation. It doesn't stop at budgets or even casualties either. It carries forward into higher debt, weaker currencies, and fewer opportunities over time, often landing on people who had no say in the decisions to begin with. And when there's no immediate constraint on spending, there's no immediate pressure to stop, which is how something like this keeps expanding without ever hitting a clean financial breaking point. The bill still gets paid, it just doesn't arrive all at once. All right, I want to bring Fernando back to chat about this one. Fernando, right now, the U.S. is spending billions of dollars every week on this war, even though the country is already sitting on about $39 trillion in debt. So when you hear that, does it feel like there are any real limits on government spending anymore? And isn't this just another instance of why Bitcoin is so darn important?
That's the way. That's and the title said that fiat
Hmm.
is war, Bitcoin is peace. Bitcoin
Yep.
makes war unaffordable because you cannot spend unlimited. You can't spend what you have. So and if you have certain amount of Bitcoin, for sure you are not gonna spend it like sending missiles to another country. You are not gonna spend
No.
it. You are gonna spend not in Tomahawk missiles, in a good
No.
Tomahawk steak. For sure, it's much better than a missile. So I think that this war, of course, is crazy, and who pays for the war besides the
Yeah.
people who is suffering, dying, and innocent people that are dying,
Yeah.
are all the other people of the world with inflation, energy costs going up, all the things, and the government doesn't care. So I think that yeah, Bitcoin is one of the best things to hold Bitcoin or to be a Bitcoiner is to make war unaffordable, because
Yeah.
otherwise the government will not stop doing this.
No, I mean, they've been doing it for so long. Why would they stop now? And people don't realize how freaking expensive these wars are. I don't know if you've ever seen these videos online, Fernando, but they have these ones where they'll have somebody like on a Gatling gun on a boat, and every time he shoots, you'll see the dollar amount that it costs. And it's like even a short burst of shots you're seeing cost tens of thousands of dollars. And for some of these missiles I was reading, some of the like anti-aircraft or like air missiles that they have to intercept drones and stuff, these drones from the Iranian Guard cost like $20,000, and the missiles to accept them can cost in the millions. So it's like they are bleeding us dry with a 20,000 to like $1 to $2 million expense for, they're paying a fraction to shoot this missile, and we're paying so many times more just to shoot it down. Like, it is expensive. Right now, even we're talking about roughly 20 to $25 billion already spent in just a few weeks of this, with the Pentagon now potentially asking for another $200 billion, which again breaks this down to around 1,500 bucks per American household is essentially financing this war. And people just don't realize they're paying for this. Why is that? Why don't we understand that ultimately we, as the citizens of this country, are the ones paying for these wars that we don't even want? Why don't we realize this, Fernando? What's wrong with
Be-
us?
because people don't understand the fiat system. One of the biggest
Hmm.
things, when I try to explain someone about Bitcoin, first I try to explain how fiat system works. If you understand how fiat system works and how all these events make your life worse, because you are going to pay more for your groceries, more for your energy, more for your gas, more for everything. When
Mm.
you understand that, you go into Bitcoin and you say, "Fuck the government." Sorry for the word, but that's what happened. And the funny thing on that is now Pentagon is asking for 200 billion US dollars to some war in the Middle East. And in the last year, when they were talking about the strategic Bitcoin reserve, they said,
Hmm.
we are not going to buy Bitcoin with the money of the taxpayer. So this
Yeah,
is
but
the
they'll buy
ridiculous
weapons.
stuff. So they
It's
will buy
crazy.
weapons that will use to intercept 20,000 US dollar drones. This is the stupidity of the governments all around
Yeah,
the
just
world.
think of all the Bitcoin we could buy with $200 billion. And then, like, when it's back up in a few months, you can look like the smartest move ever. And, Fernando, a lot of people out there don't fully understand, like, so I'm hoping you can break it down a little bit for us. If the United States, for instance, ran on a Bitcoin standard, right, how would that change, you think, how we approach these big global wars we're financing? Because people hear that phrase like Bitcoin solves this, Bitcoin solved this. But in terms of these global wars being funded, are you able to break down for our audience a little bit like how exactly Bitcoin changes this and how it would help prevent these ridiculous wars?
Let's put not on a war. Let's put on your personal finance. You have
Hmm.
one. You can have. Imagine that you can print your own money.
Hmm.
So if you can print your own money, you can go out and you can spend whatever you want. You see any stupid thing and you buy it because
Hmm.
you can print your own money. Imagine if you have Bitcoin, you cannot print more Bitcoin. So you need to be very careful on what you spend. And if you spend money or your Bitcoin in something, you are waiting for a return that is even bigger than the return that Bitcoin can give you. So the government, if the government cannot print money and they only have Bitcoin, imagine we're running a Bitcoin standard. Every Bitcoin we spend in war doesn't come back.
Right.
While money, I can go with the Pentagon and say, okay, give me 200 billion. It reminds me, I don't know if you watch the movie Coming to America, the Eddie Murphy movie. There is a scene where the assistant of the prince goes to the mail and asks for $500,000 to the king, and the guy asks to the working on the mail, should I ask 1 million? And the girl said, why don't you ask 2 million? Like if it's
why not?
So why, if the Pentagon now is 200 billion, why don't you ask 1 trillion or 2 trillion?
Yeah.
If you just can't print it. So that's the difference. If you don't have this potential to print money, you cannot fund the war. So and in the history, for example, the biggest hyperinflation happened during wartime because governments print, even in the Roman Empire. So I hope it clarifies.
It does. Yeah, no, I mean, you're one of the top Bitcoin educators out there. So I appreciate you breaking that down for us, Fernando. You know, it really requires everybody personally, and if you were in the government, just to be more judicious with your funds. And we can't just be, having wars whenever we want and having the government, like you said, print out money, which ultimately affects all of us, especially when it's crazy because this is a war nobody asked for. And now we're ultimately paying for it. And we all know we're paying for it. And they're going to essentially telling us you're going to be paying even more for it going forward. So it's like now more than ever, I hope people are looking at what's going on. And we're really starting to ask those questions like there's got to be a better way, because we know that better way will ultimately lead them to Bitcoin. And this is a perfect example of everything that is wrong with our government right now and their ability to just print money whenever they want and ruin our purchasing power. It's ridiculous and it needs to stop. And Bitcoin, as we know, certainly helps with that. And you certainly help with that, Fernando, because it's always an absolute treat when we get to have you on the show. I always love getting your insights and expertise. So I want to thank you for sharing those with us. Before we let you go today, Fernando, you have your own amazing Bitcoin podcast. I know it's both in English and Espanol. So where can our audience go find it if they haven't checked it out already?
Well, they can follow us on X. The Bitcoin _ is our English account. And we have our podcast in Spanish. It's Libertarian BTC ESP. If you go there, you will find all our other social media so you can connect us.
Amazing. Well, Fernando, I want to again thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great time while you're over in Bangkok, and we'll be curious to get the word on the streets when you get back to Hong Kong with what we talked about this morning. But I hope you have a great weekend, my friend. I appreciate you staying up late with us, and we'll be excited to have you back on next week.
See you next week, Hank. And it's difficult to not have fun in Bangkok. So.
Oh, don't have too much fun. I know what goes on there. I'll be watching you. All right. I'll see you next time, Fernando. Enjoy your Friday night, my friend. Cheers. All right, we're going to take a break here at RoxomTV News. But when we're back, we're diving into our second hour of programming, I will be joined by the one and only Roxom's own Walker America, who's going to be co-hosting the second hour with me. And we've got a little treat at the end of today's show that you are not going to want to miss. A lot more in store coming your way here at RoxomTV News. So stay tuned. I'll be back with Walker and more of today's top news stories right after this quick break. All right, everybody, welcome as we jump into our second hour here at RoxomTV News on this fine Friday. And joining me for today's second hour, you know him, he's one of the most patriotic men in all of Bitcoin, and he's one of RoxomTV's own hosts. Of course, we're talking about Walker America. Walker, happy Friday. Great getting to have you co-host with me today. How are you this morning?
Great, Hank. But usually you say the most patriotic man in
I
Bitcoin. Today it was just one
do.
of the most. So I'm just wondering who might have
Okay.
topped me out at the number one spot.
There's a lot of patriotic Bitcoiners out there, and frankly, I want to see you up your game just a little bit with the patriotism, but I got something that might help for that in just a bit. So I'll be excited to share that with you on this Friday. You ready to get into these top news stories or what, bud?
Let's do it.
All right, I'll lead us off and then I'll have you take the helm. Here we go. The U.S. is delaying potential strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure while still not clearly saying who it's even negotiating with. President Trump announced a new deadline for a deal. On Truth Social, he posted, "I am pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th, 2026 at 8 p.m. He also said talks are ongoing and going very well, despite the fact that it remains unclear who those talks are even with, given that several senior Iranian officials have been killed since the war began, and Iran continues to deny that negotiations are happening at all. The Pentagon is developing options for what it calls a final blow, including sending up to 10,000 additional ground troops on top of the 7,000 already on the way, with the decision expected by next week. Meanwhile, the UAE said it would join a multinational Hormuz security force to escort ships through the strait, becoming the first Gulf state to publicly commit. Brent crude is already pushing toward $110 a barrel and stocks are sliding, which tells you exactly how markets see this going. And this is what Operation Epic Fury has to show for us so far. After more than a month of shutdown chaos, U.S. lawmakers finally moved to fund Homeland Security. In the middle of the night, the Senate passed DHS funding by unanimous voice vote at 2 a.m. yesterday morning. I guess it'd be this morning, technically. Now, that funding covers TSA, the Coast Guard, FEMA, and the CISA, which means that TSA agents should finally get paid and potentially ease the long lines travelers have been dealing with at airports. Meanwhile, ICE and Border Patrol are still left out, with Republicans planning to handle that separately through reconciliation, meaning the broader fight over border policy isn't going anywhere. The deal largely gave Democrats what they had been pushing for, and Republicans accepted it after running out of time, especially after Trump had earlier posted he would order TSA workers to be paid immediately, weakening their leverage mid-negotiation. Now, the bill heads to the House for a vote, but the bigger picture is that core security operations were stuck in limbo for weeks, which is not exactly comforting when those are the agencies you rely on when something actually goes wrong. Meta, well, they're laying off hundreds of employees while spending massive amounts of money to build the technology that will probably replace them. Across divisions like Reality Labs, Facebook, recruiting, sales, and global operations, Meta cut several hundred roles this week, marking its second round of layoffs this year. At the same time, the company is investing $135 billion into AI infrastructure and confirmed a 5-year, $27 billion deal with Nebius to secure computing power for its next generation models, structured as $12 billion guaranteed with a $15 billion backstop. Zuckerberg has already said that work once done by large teams can now be handled by a single talented person. And what's happening here is that idea moving from theory into reality. This comes as the company's shares dropped 7% after legal concerns over harm to young users added pressure. And when you combine that with the layoffs, it paints a pretty clear picture of where this is heading, which is fewer people doing more work, or more accurately, fewer people needed it all. All right, I want to bring Walker in to talk about what's going on at Meta here. Walker, we got Meta. They're laying off hundreds of employees while spending over $100 billion building the AI systems that do similar work and will likely replace them. When you hear that, does it feel like a natural progress in the space, or does it feel like people are being left behind? Where do you land on this one?
I think that in every technological industrial revolution, it always is going to feel like people are being left behind. At the advent of the automobile, people were very worried about all the horse and buggy drivers and the horses themselves being left behind. Think about the horses, right? They need carts to pull. But at the end of the day, while new technologies always displace entrenched incumbent technologies and the people who work in those fields, it always also leads to new sorts of fields being expanded, right? It leads,
I hope so.
Human beings, we are nothing if not adaptable, Hank. Human beings, sometimes we adapt slowly. We're pretty good at adapting fast, and we certainly have to get even better at it because the rate of change is accelerating. So for me, I mean, you don't like to hear about people losing their jobs, obviously, but this happens everywhere all the time, constantly. At the end of the day, the folks at Meta, they're going to be fine. I'm sure they have large exit packages, large stock options plans that they exercised, and they were getting paid probably $250,000 to $500,000 anyway. They'll be okay.
Yeah, I hope they saved.
They'll land on their feet. Hope they bought Bitcoin. Hopefully some of them did. But no, the point here is I think this is natural, right? We're going to see this. It's going to accelerate too. I think we've just seen the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the layoffs that are coming. It's really just been in kind of the big tech sector, with some very prominent ones. For instance, Block, Jack Dorsey writing that open public letter, laying off 40% of their workforce, basically.
Or something like
significant.
that. Yeah.
I thought he did it with a lot of class. But the point here is that, look, companies are going to have to come to grips with this sooner or later. The later they do it, the more painful it's going to be. The more they draw it out, the more painful it's going to be. Maybe it's just better to rip the Band-Aid off, but never makes it easy. Doesn't make it easy losing a job. But at the same time, this is what we should expect, and it's what happens every single time we have a new technological disruption.
Is it really the companies that are having to come to grips with this, or is the employees though? Because I totally agree with you. We've seen it time and again. A new technology replaces an older one, and things change. But AI, we're literally building machines that will do the job, all sorts of different jobs for us. So while I agree that we've seen this kind of play out before, doesn't the advent of like this agentic AI and what we're seeing kind of make this a little bit different though than some of the technology replacements we've seen in other parts, of the world in the past? Like this is kind of inherently different, no?
I mean, of course, each technological revolution is going to be inherently different than the last, right? Like this one, the steam engine was different from the cotton gin. Right. These are
you still needed a person to operate those, right? Like this, it's like a computer's just going to do it, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, you still needed a horse to draw the carriage until you didn't. Right. And I think that, again, it's like the situation is this, I guess the question was, is this a bigger kind of shock, or is this a bigger deal to the people or to the companies? Hard to say there. I think if you've been working, though, in big tech for a while, you should have probably seen this coming. Massive rounds of big tech layoffs are nothing new. This is something that we've seen time and time again, right? They tend to raise a bunch of money. They tend to usually spend on more than they should, maybe overexert themselves, claw back a lot, do it all over again, rinse and repeat in 5 years. Of course, this is a fundamentally different technology and technological shift than anything we've seen so far, but it's always going to be different. The question really is this time different from how people respond to it, by how people pick themselves up and, find new ways to create value. I have faith in humans, but let's see.
I agree with you. The one thing I will say is, though, for all those other technological advancements that happened, we didn't have billionaires telling us how no one would have to work and there'd be universal basic income as a result of these technologies, which I think makes this a little inherently different than what we've seen before. But I don't know. I certainly can't tell the future. I'll be curious to how it plays out. And I know we've got some more AI stories coming up. Is that right?
That we do. Yeah. A U.S. federal judge has issued a preliminary injunction blocking the Pentagon's designation of Anthropic as a supply chain risk and halting Trump's order for all federal agencies to immediately cease using Claude. In her ruling, she called the move Orwellian, arbitrary, and capricious, and said they appeared, quote, designed to punish Anthropic for publicly criticizing the Pentagon's contracting position. The judge's order takes effect in 7 days to allow the government time to appeal. The ruling has broader implications if it establishes that the U.S. government cannot weaponize national security designations against American companies for exercising First Amendment rights. Argentina's president built his brand on cleaning up corruption, and now he's dealing with allegations of his own. New polling shows President Javier Milei losing ground, with approval ratings dropping nearly 5 points in March as multiple controversies begin to stack up. A big part of that pressure is tied to his past promotion of the Libra cryptocurrency, which surged and then predictably collapsed, leaving investors with losses and triggering fraud complaints that are still unfolding. At the same time, leaked communications have reportedly linked Milei to a financier connected to the situation, while a separate issue involving a top aide's finances and use of government resources is adding fuel to the criticism. Layer on top of that ongoing economic strain, including low wages and unemployment, And what you get is a leader who campaigned as an outsider, now facing the same trust questions he ran against, which becomes a real problem when voters are already feeling the squeeze in their day-to-day lives. Finally, Roxom has officially launched SATA, expanding its Bitcoin-denominated income products alongside STRC, aka Stretch. SATA creates the first bi-monthly Bitcoin dividend schedule on any trading platform, effectively giving investors a Bitcoin paycheck every 2 weeks. Take a look at the promotional video they just dropped.
Imagine a constant Bitcoin cash flow. How about earning BTC every 2 weeks? Now you can buy Strive and Stretch on Roxom and stack Bitcoin every 2 weeks. That's the Bitcoin paycheck.
Those videos get me every time. Okay, here's how it works. STRC pays out at the end of each month, while SATA pays mid-month. Hold both on Roxom, and dividends arrive in Bitcoin twice a month, no fiat conversion, no intermediaries. Payments are settled directly in BTC, reinforcing Roxom's push to denominate capital markets entirely in Bitcoin. SATA, issued by Strive Inc., targets a 12 to 14% annual dividend with monthly distributions and a $25 liquidation preference. The company has set aside reserves to support the initial 12% rate, subject to board approval. Combined with STRC's 11.5% yield profile, these are now among the highest yield instruments in Roxom's Bitcoin native system. The bigger shift is structural. Roxom is building what it calls a Bitcoin paycheck system, where traditional financial assets from preferred stocks to eventually equities like Apple or Microsoft pay out directly in BTC instead of dollars. SATA and STRC are the first real proof of that model at scale. And momentum is already showing. Just yesterday, Roxom reported that 19,000 shares of STRC were bought by users across 45 countries, signaling global demand for Bitcoin-denominated yield. With SATA going live in the coming hours, Roxom now offers both STRC and SATA, marking another step forward toward a financial system where income, assets, and settlement all run on Bitcoin. Hank, want to bring you back in here to get your take on this. Dividend stocks or yield-bearing stocks are typically not too interesting to me. But I gotta say, what the old parent company Roxom is doing with this is pretty darn cool. Being able to earn that in Bitcoin, and the question is always, where does the yield come from with these, right? We all remember the BlockFi blowups and all of these. We're talking about something very different here, right? And I don't know, when you see just right off the bat here in this initial launch, 45 plus countries with people, there's clearly an appetite for this, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, this is wild. I couldn't believe that when I saw 45 plus countries. And I got to say, those commercials are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. They got the Pirates of the Caribbean cast to make this Roxom commercial. Like, obviously, people are excited. And yeah, no, it's a big deal. And I saw Michael Saylor, I believe, retweeted fervently the STRC 19,000 shares or whatever were brought up on Roxom. Like, the demand is there. It's just a matter of, like Bitcoin, educating people to understand why these products are so useful and so important. And 11.5%, like, sign me up. What are your thoughts on it? I mean, it's a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty darn cool. And again, the fact that you're paying, there's no need for the conversion, right? Because I think a lot of people, especially, if you're, let's say, a retiree or something like that, and you're looking for just some stable cash flow to be able to pay for monthly expenses, things like that. Okay, maybe you want to just have that in fiat, right? Can't blame you. Do whatever you want with your money. But if you're on the younger side like us, and we are getting a bit long in the tooth these days, Hank. But if you're on the relatively younger side like us, you probably want to just keep finding ways to stack more Bitcoin. This is a pretty interesting way to be able to do that, a pretty novel way, and then to not have the need to do the fiat conversion at any point in there is, in my mind, just kind of a game changer. It's pretty darn cool. So yeah, shout out to the old parent company Roxom for this one. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, whatever I got to do to keep Uncle Sam out of my business. I don't have to transfer my money into U.S. trash tokens or anything. It's great. I mean, Roxom's really doing it. And it's crazy to see this kind of play out in real time, little by little. I remember when the exchange kind of officially opened not that long ago, and now seeing it in just a few months kind of take shape is really exciting. And we're really kudos to everybody at the Roxom team. Really great work you're doing over there. And Michael Saylor approved. So you know you're on the right track. All right, Walker, I think it's time for you and I to take a quick break, but when we're back, we've got more of today's top news stories. And in just a bit, Walker and I are going to be taking a little walk through America. Now, what does that mean? You're going to have to stay tuned to find out. More Roxom TV news coming your way after this.
Welcome back to Roxom TV. The price of Bitcoin is 66,000 infinitely printable Federal Reserve notes per coin, down slightly on the day. Speaking of Bitcoin, we now go over to Hong Kong, where police can now require individuals to provide passwords or technical assistance to access encrypted data during national security investigations. Refusing to comply is a criminal offense, with reported penalties including fines and potential jail time. The law applies broadly to all electronic devices, phones, laptops, and any storage capable of holding encrypted data. It also applies to anyone in Hong Kong, including foreign nationals and travelers in transit. That last point is especially important. Authorities now have wider powers to seize, search, and retain devices if they believe the data may relate to national security. The threshold for what qualifies is intentionally broad, giving enforcement significant discretion. For Bitcoin users, this is where self-custody becomes real. A hardware wallet is not just a gadget, it is your direct access to bearer assets. If your keys are tied to a device you're carrying, the device becomes a point of legal pressure. Bitcoin changes the equation though, but only if used correctly. Unlike a bank account or custodial platforms, Bitcoin can be secured in a way that is not physically discoverable. Seed phrases can be memorized, multisig can be geographically distributed, and access can exist entirely outside of any single jurisdiction. The takeaway is simple. Laws can compel access to devices, but they cannot compel access to what isn't physically there. Bitcoin is the only asset where you can cross a border with your wealth stored purely in your mind. Hank, let's go ahead and bring you back on in here. Seeing this, I mean, borders have always been a point where there's a lot of risks to the traveler, right? You're basically in the, let's say, land side equivalent of international waters, except, you surrender a lot of rights at the border. People may not realize this. They can basically hold you indefinitely. They can throw all sorts of random charges at you. You don't really have a right to a lawyer, or they don't have to give you one for a long time. Depending on the country,
ICE will even get you there now.
Yeah, and depending on the country you are in, you can get very screwed at the border, especially when it comes to your devices. So, I mean, what's the first thing that kind of comes to your mind when you hear this? I mean, is it that, wow, this is yet another reason to memorize that seed phrase, maybe, or just maybe do a little beef up on your security, get some more burner phones if you're planning on traveling through Hong Kong? What's your take?
Oh man, you know what my biggest point of concern on this is, we've seen it here in the United States. I was thinking specifically with what happened in Minnesota. It's governments framing things as national security issues is kind of this broad blanket to just do whatever the hell they want. Because kind of in the same sense of like, you must protect the children. I think everybody can agree like national security needs to be beefed up, or it could be better, right? But I worry that in a similar sense that we were kind of seeing that rationale used in Minnesota to do whatever the hell they want. I feel like governments are going to keep doing this to expand their powers slowly over time till eventually we're in a place where this all is just commonplace to us compared to what we experience now. So I feel like we're seeing this slow creep of governments continue to put their hands into everything that, is private to us, specifically money. And as we know, like you said, Bitcoin is one of those things that helps with this. All I need is that seed phrase in my noggin, and they don't have access to it. And because for me, it's like, where does it stop? You can look at my phone to do what? And then do what else? It's a slippery slope, and I worry about the future of humanity being controlled by big governments just like this. But as you and I know, Bitcoin is something that, kind of fights back against this. So I'm happy we have Bitcoin, but I don't like what we're seeing over in Hong Kong, and I feel like this is going to continue to spread. Where are you landing on this one, Walker?
Yeah, I think that I completely agree that this is going to continue to spread. The totalitarian temptation is very real. governments around the world are already trying. The government wants, well, it can't want anything per se in a real sense, but the inertia of government is toward increasing its own size, scope, and authority. You're going to see this becoming more widespread. You're going to see these sorts of, crackdowns and these laws. Again, like you said, how would you like this wrapped? Protect the children or counterterrorism? It's always one of the two. That meme's been around for decades and it still rings true. I think this is a good reminder for people, though, not just about why Bitcoin is so important and how you should also, take very careful measures when it comes to if you're traveling with Bitcoin, if you're going to travel, quote, with Bitcoin or with your Bitcoin keys, of course, be very cautious about that. Make sure you really, really need to be doing that if you're going to. And if you really, really need to, a brain wallet is probably your best bet. Certainly don't have a seed phrase written on a piece of paper. I should just let everybody know that. Do not have a seed phrase written on a piece of paper. The machines that they have that scan through your bags can detect, the indentation of writing on paper. So please do not do that. These guys know what seed phrases are now. It's also a good reminder for people, though, that the types of things that can happen to you at a border are they already go pretty far beyond this. Most plane crossing borders, most ports of entry, if they take your phone from you, if they say we need to have your phone, first of all, you don't have to unlock it. Now in Hong Kong, you will. You will definitely have to unlock it. So maybe just get a brand new clean burner phone if you're going through there. But even in other places, they can take your phone, they pop it into a little slider machine, they clone it completely. They can literally mirror your phone, clone the entire thing, clone all of the data on it. Even if that data is encrypted, clone all of that, right? You need to be really, really cautious anytime, especially like if you're traveling to, to China. If you're going to mainland China, you're going to want to be really, really careful there. Not saying, if the CCP is listening, not saying you guys are up to anything bad, but boy, they sure do get very, very snoopy. And generally, another good best practice is turn off Face ID before crossing any border. Because if they can just grab your phone, then show your face to it and unlock it, you're kind of up a creek with no canoe. So make sure you turn that off. It's a very good practice to turn that off every time before you cross a border, or turn your phone off completely so that you have to go from reboot and re-enter your PIN code, etc. There's a lot of things you can do to protect yourself here, but I don't know, Hank. That seems that the totalitarian temptation is growing stronger by the day, and I don't like it. I don't know about you.
I don't like either. And, it reminds me of I was in Thailand myself a couple of years ago, and I was making a video. That's what I do. I make videos when I was going along the way. And I very stupidly took a quick video snapshot of as we were going through customs, and oh boy, were they upset about that. And they pulled me aside. They went through my whole phone. They probably got all my private photos.
Oh boy.
It was very invasive, but at the same time, I had to be smarter, and I have to be listen, when you're in another country, it's their rules, and you're a house guest, and you got to abide by those. So I very much expect these types of things to be popping up more often down the line, and we all have to be prepared for the realities of that. Like you said, have that seed phrase in your brain. And brain wallet, is that a thing yet? Because I'm kind of loving that name for it's like a Bitcoin wallet. I don't know. You might be onto something.
There may be somebody who has already got a website set up for that, because I know there's a lot of different tricks that you can use, memory tricks to essentially more easily retain that mnemonic seed phrase. If you're good with memorization, probably not a problem. But it's not something you want to forget if you have no other copies of that. So be very careful playing around with brain wallets. But again, I think, guys, just general best practices you want to have I've got a Lightning wallet. Well, I got 20 Lightning wallets on my phone. Keep some pocket change in there for traveling, especially going to Bitcoin conferences, because I want to spend sats. But boy, don't travel with a laptop that's got a bunch of, if you've got Bitcoin keys on that laptop, if you've got any sort of hot wallets with any significant amount of Bitcoin, you want to be very careful, guys, because things can go fast very quickly, or go south very quickly. And not just at the border, but also, especially it's getting up into Bitcoin conference season, guys. Be careful out there. A lot of IRL meat space scammers who want to try to, pretty girl wants to buy you a drink in Vegas. Maybe just think twice. I'm not saying not saying she's not really into you, but just be careful out there, guys. There's whether it's the government or somebody trying to scam you, there's a lot of ways to lose your Bitcoin.
See, that's very confusing because she kept telling me she wanted my seed phrase, and I guess I misinterpreted that one. Silly me. Oh, boy.
And with that, it's
Oh,
about
boy.
time we head to a quick commercial break. So before we get any deeper down that analogy, all right, guys, we're going to be right back here in just a moment on Roxom with more. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll see you back here in just a second on Roxom TV. Just pass to Hank.
Yep.
Welcome back to Roxom TV, everyone. Up next, David Sachs is stepping down as Trump's AI and crypto czar after hitting the 130-day limit. Another exit follows Bo Hines, who had already stepped away earlier this year. Sachs will stay on as co-chair of the president's Tech Advisory Council, but his direct role inside the White House is ending. He was one of the most influential voices shaping crypto and AI policy during Trump's second term. Sachs helped get President Trump to sign off on the strategic Bitcoin reserve. That was a major shift. Bitcoin moved from the sidelines into national strategy, but key details are still missing. No audit, no custody clarity, no accumulation plan. Although we don't have any visibility on the next steps, Sachs deserves credit for putting Bitcoin on the sovereign map. The question, though, is now simple. Does the U.S. actually follow through? Hank, I want to bring you in to get your take on this.
Yeah.
A lot of hype around this, obviously has been for some time. But, you know, what's Trump always say, you know, promises made, promises kept. You think they were kept in this case? I wasn't holding my breath, let's say, but I think a lot of people, if you were more apt to believe everything a politician says, you may have thought we'd be further along right now on this strategic reserve journey. What's your take on this as we now near the end of Sachs's tenure there as the czar?
Yeah, I don't think price is necessarily the only barometer that really tells what's actually happening here. But I can't help it. But yeah, I think I was a little underwhelmed. We started off the year so hot, right? And we had all these promises: crypto president of the world, crypto capital of the world. Like David Czar, he was called the crypto czar, right? Or Sachs was. It's hard to say. I can't say like how if the other side of the aisle won the election, would we be where we are now? Probably not. I feel like the rails are slowly being put in place, and this is no small change. We're literally trying to integrate Bitcoin and cryptos into legacy finance, so it's a big thing that's going to take time. But with that being said, we saw so much hype and so much talk at the jump of the start of Trump's second term, and right now it doesn't feel like we've kind of moved to the extent I'd hoped we would at this time. But maybe I was just being a little overly optimistic. I mean, I could see someone landing on both sides of this one. Where do you land on it? We're a year and change in. The price of Bitcoin is down compared to when Trump entered office, and we don't quite have a lot of the clarity we were hoping for. Where are you landing on this one, Walker?
I mean, personally, just speaking of audits, I'd still love to see that audit of Fort Knox, Hank. Remember when Trump was saying that we were going to get the audit of Fort Knox and we were all going to be very, very surprised, or it's going to be the best audit you've ever seen? People are saying they've never seen an audit like this. It's such an audit. Wow. It's all audit. But no, really, I would like to see that audit of Fort Knox. I think there's probably a pretty good reason why we haven't, though. But anyway, I digress. The point is I think it's been interesting because not only, let's leave aside, I wasn't expecting the government to start printing money to buy Bitcoin, right? What I will give them, let's give credit where credit is due, and then maybe give some criticisms. The credit where credit is due is they at least very clearly demarcated. They put a delineation between Bitcoin and crypto in this executive order, specifically saying we are going to not sell any Bitcoin. We're going to look, although we may have some contractors' sons steal the Bitcoin, but that's a different story. We're not going to sell any Bitcoin. We're going to look at budget neutral ways to accumulate more Bitcoin. That's that. For the crypto side, the digital asset stockpile, we will not be looking at ways to accumulate it anymore unless we confiscate it. We will look at ways to sell it. So they made that very clear distinction. I've got to give them credit for that. Now, as far as those budget neutral explorations, doesn't seem like there's been any headway there. Again, I wasn't holding my breath. But on the other side, on just the auditing of this, I'd love to actually see, I don't expect them to give us the results of the audit, but to at least have some direction there. There wasn't even really much talk about the results. That was supposed to be, I believe, what was it? It was either 30, 60, or 90 days from the issuance of the executive order that there was supposed to be a full audit, all government agencies who had any control of Bitcoin to report in. We still don't know exactly how many Bitcoin the government has. I don't know if that means they have a lot more than we thought or a lot less. Is it a Fort Knox situation or something else? Time will tell,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think at the end of the day, in terms of the price action, I've at least been grateful, Hank. You know, today we're down under 66,000. I'm grateful to be able to stack some more cheap sats. My dollar is going further while everything else, gas and everything else gets more expensive. Bitcoin is still on sale, people. So take advantage while you can. These prices won't last forever.
Everything's got to go. Yeah, no, I agree. And you make some really good points. We do have clarity one way or the other in some things that we didn't have before. And the really important thing I think we all need to remember right now, if we're feeling a little underwhelmed about where the space has gone in the last year or so, is that Trump and his family are so heavily invested in Bitcoin's successes going forward. And maybe that's not the best way to look at it per se, but if you want to see where things are going, just look at what the president's doing within his own circle. American Bitcoin, all that stuff. He's not letting Bitcoin go away. He was debanked, right? He's too deep. So I feel fine about where we are in the space. Again, it'd be nice if that number was, a little bigger, but I feel the same as I did back in, October when things were 120 something. The situation hasn't changed much. So I remain optimistic, and I think we'll be all right. Let's move on to our next story here, Walker, because the Olympics, well, they're drawing a hard line on eligibility for women's events, and it's already sparking some global pushback. The International Olympic Committee announced that starting with the 2028 Games, participation in all female categories will be limited to biological females. And athletes will be tested for the SRY gene using a cheek swab, saliva, or blood sample. The committee says the rule is about fairness, arguing it is absolutely clear that biological males should not compete in the female category, but the reaction has been far from unanimous. France's own Olympic Committee is already pushing back, warning the testing could violate national bioethics laws. And the scientist who discovered the SRY gene in 1990 has also criticized the policy, noting that it doesn't account for testosterone levels or how the body actually responds to them. Back in August, he said mandatory genetic testing for women athletes is misguided. Now, this shift from a sports rule into a legal and scientific fight that could play out well before 2028. And depending on how it lands, it could reshape not only Olympic competition, but how gender eligibility is defined across global athletics. And for the first time, a sitting president is about to put his name directly on U.S. money. Starting in June, paper currency will carry Donald Trump's signature as part of the country's 250th anniversary rollout. That means Trump and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's names will replace the Treasurer of the United States on U.S. bills, ending a tradition that has been in place since 1861 when federal currency was first issued during the Civil War. Now, that change begins with the $100 bill and will eventually extend across all denominations, marking a pretty significant visual shift in something most people handle every day without really thinking about it. And while this might sound symbolic, money is one of the most persistent forms of national branding. So putting a sitting president's name on it blurs a line that's been intentionally left alone for over a century, which raises some real questions about where that line ultimately goes next. All right, I want to bring Walker back to chat about this one. Walker, for the first time ever, a sitting president is going to have his name printed directly on U.S. currency. Surprise, surprise, it's President Trump. And this hasn't changed since back in the Civil War when American currency was first issued. So when you hear that, is this a symbolic change at all, or is this just Trump being Trump and branding whatever he can with his name? We've seen it on board games. We've seen it on steaks. We've seen it on, I think, tequilas, pretty much everything. What did you make of this when you heard it?
We saw it on the stimmy checks as well. This is to me, this is Trump being Trump. I think a lot does this actually matter at all? No.
I'm surprised he stopped at the signature. I was expecting his face on it.
Honestly, that I'm not kind of surprised it didn't go that far either. But
right?
No, I mean, does this actually matter to anyone at the end of the day? No. Is this one of those things that Trump does because he knows it's going to piss a lot of people off and distract from other things? Probably yes, in my opinion. Does this change the fact that the dollar is going to continue being debased forever? Nope. It's another guy's signature on a piece of paper. And at the end of the day, it's like, it is just a piece of paper. It's printed out of thin air. And it's often not actually physically printed at all. It's just some keystrokes on a database. So does this matter? I don't think so that much, but I'm sure it will distract from some other things. So that much you can be assured of.
Yeah, it feels very much in line with kind of the Gulf of America, Mexico thing. Like nobody was really asking for this, but he has decided that it's important, so we're going to do it. But I will say, though, as we know, Trump is the master marketer extraordinaire, given how much more American currency they're probably going to be printing in the not too distant future. It's a great branding opportunity for him, right? Like they're just going to be papering the world with Donald Trump's signature everywhere. So, like, again, master of branding, but does it move the needle? Not really, you know. So, is it weird to? Is it surprising though, you all? This has never happened since 1861. Trump is the first to do it. Is it? That feels kind of on brand, though, right?
It feels very much on brand. You know, again, who does it bigger, better, and more boldly than Donald Trump?
Nobody. I can't wait for the big neon sign to eventually get placed on top of the White House. It's going to be very exciting. We're a real classy nation now. I love it. All right, we're going to take a break here, Walker, you and I. But when we're back, we've got more of today's top news stories. And just a bit, Walker and I are going to be taking a walk across America. What does it mean? I don't know. You'll have to stay to find out. We'll be back with that and more right after this. Welcome back to RoxomTV News. In case you haven't been paying attention, the United States is now spending billions on war every week, while already sitting on $39 trillion in debt, and somehow that's not slowing anything down. You see, over in the Middle East, the cost of the Iran war is accelerating fast, with the United States burning through $11.3 billion in the first 6 days alone. And now, just a few weeks in, that number has already crossed $20 billion and is expected to hit $25 billion within days. At the same time, the human toll is rising as well, with reports of over 1,000 Iranian civilians killed, including 200 children, alongside 13 U.S. service members, making it clear this isn't some abstract geopolitical exercise. It's very real, very fast-moving, and very expensive. The Pentagon is now preparing to request more than $200 billion in additional funding to expand the war effort, which is already drawing pushback in Congress as lawmakers try to figure out how you fund something like that when the country is already deeply in debt. Now, at scale, as macro analyst Lynn Albin points out, that $200 billion comes out to roughly $1,500 per American household, which is where this starts to feel a lot less theoretical. And when you zoom in on how the money is actually being spent, the scale gets even harder to ignore, because the United States burned through $5.6 billion in munitions in just 2 days, with daily costs ranging from $500 million to over $1 billion, and sometimes hitting $1 to $2 billion during peak operations. A single Tomahawk missile can cost up to $5 million, and more than 300 were used early on, while defensive systems like Patriot and THAAD interceptors can cost anywhere from $3 million to $15 million per shot, which creates this dynamic where relatively cheap threats force extremely expensive responses in real time. Now, if you zoom out, because this is where it gets interesting, since despite all of this spending, the United States doesn't need to have the money sitting there to pay for it. Instead, the Treasury issues debt, markets absorb the debt, and when things tighten, the Federal Reserve steps in with liquidity, meaning wars today aren't paid for up front, they're financed and pushed into the future. As Lynn Alden puts it, war is expensive and thus leads to high sovereign debt levels, and high sovereign debt levels can also lead to war. And what that means in practice is the cost doesn't show up as a single bill. It builds quietly over time through inflation, through wages that don't keep up, and through a steady erosion of purchasing power that most people feel but can't easily track back to moments like this. Because the real cost of war shows up not just in missiles or defense budgets, but in the everyday economy, and what your money buys, and how far your paycheck stretches, and in how much more expensive life becomes without a clear explanation. It doesn't stop at budgets or even casualties either. It carries forward into higher debt, weaker currency, and fewer opportunities over time, often landing on people who had no say in the decisions to begin with. And when there's no immediate constraint on spending, there's no immediate pressure to stop, which is how something like this keeps expanding without ever hitting a clean financial breaking point. The bill still gets paid, it just doesn't arrive all at once. All right, I want to bring in Walker to chat about this one. Walker, what are you making of this one? Any surprises here for you? What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I mean, I think that we're in an era where there will be increasing frequency of crises. All of those will be opportunities for massive amounts of money to be printed out of thin air. and this isn't something that's exclusive to the United States, right? You saw the, let's say, the monetary shock that happened during the COVID era. That wasn't just a US thing, that was across the world, all central banks, right? Because the problem is that they only have one button. They just have that print button, right? Yeah, there's different things they can do. There's different things they can move around. But at the end of the day, they've got one option, and it's we print more money, right? You're not funding a war by trimming your balance sheet. You're not funding a war by being fiscally responsible. It's very uncommon to fund wars these days by raising taxes, because it turns out that's highly unpopular. And if who knew? War is unpopular, and paying taxes to fund wars that are unpopular is unpopular. So what do? They will paper over it. They will blow out the deficits even more. The interest expense on the debt will grow and become unsustainable. They will need to print even more money so that the interest expense on the national debt becomes more serviceable, and they can inflate it away. So on and so forth we go, ever more debasement until we hit zero.
Yeah, it's a wonderful cycle we found ourselves in here. And I always wonder, like, what are the implications for this, for the market and for Bitcoin? And luckily for you and I, Walker, we've got our local crypto wunderkind and resident chart shark, Luca Pagano, joining us today to help us break down what he is seeing in the Bitcoin charts right now. As you mentioned earlier in the show, we've seen Bitcoin have a bit of a pullback. It had been hanging around 70. I think it's around 66, 65K right now. So I'm curious to see where Luca thinks this market is going. Luca, are you with us this morning?
Hey, I'm here. It's great to be here again. Thanks, Walker. Thanks, Hank, for having me always. Yeah, it's a tough day in the markets, right?
Yeah, it is. But we're excited we have you here to help make sense of the madness here, Luca. So what are you seeing right now? We've been hovering around kind of 67 to 72 for a bit. We saw a bit of a pullback this morning. There's unlimited government spending on this war that's happening. What are the markets? What are the numbers telling you right now, Luca? We need some guidance.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, I don't know if I can share screen here real quick. Maybe you see me.
We have you up. Yeah, you're sharing.
Oh, great. Okay. So basically, what I believe is going on here, honestly, is like the old wiggling of accumulation. We talked this last week with Walker, which is great, because what I see at a bigger scale, let's start with the weekly. I always love to see this a little bit zoomed out chart, where essentially, what we're seeing is all this green area. For me, it's bidding time. You gotta be patient. You gotta play your bids. You gotta put them, ideally. This is not financial advice, guys. This is just me reading charts, remember, and just telling you how I win or lose money. Probably lose, so don't follow me. But now I just like to stack those beats, because when the moment comes, you never want to buy, So that's what I do in this golden pocket on the 50 to 61% retrace or of the full, let's say, what we can call what was the bull market. Maybe it's still, maybe it's not. I don't really care. I just like print out the long run. We're in the midst right now of all the work we did, from $16,000 in 2020, ends of 2022, till $123,000 by September last year. So essentially, this is my bidding area. We can go lower, of course. The market always surprises us. That's why it's not so easy to make money. But again, this for me makes sense, and I think this week particularly, honestly, is pretty for me, like we were talking it last week. For me, it's pretty important. Why? Because the 9th of March week, that went from 9th, to 16th, we basically broke out the 71K range, which I think is pretty, pretty interesting, because if you see in a daily chart, we've been battling these levels all over the place, right? And I told you guys that this kind of had the shape of a bear market, like of a bear flag, but we shall see. Right now we're breaking down, but it doesn't, it doesn't surprise me in terms of the range. We still, for me, this is a long place to go, guys. Like from 80 K till 50 to like K. For me, this is a range bound market where you gotta stack your bids, you gotta be patient, and we gotta see when Bitcoin wants to, make us happy again.
Luca, is it safe to say, if I'm looking at your chart correctly, the bottom of your green range there is right about 58K? Does this mean you're predicting the 58K gang prophecy will once again be fulfilled? Do we need to hit 58K, have the prophecy fulfilled, and then we can go to a bull run again? What's your take?
I mean, honestly, what I like when I look at the chart, guys, is two things. I see two things. I see what we call high volume nodes. So high volume nodes is parts of the chart where a lot of investors have been transacting and have been in a clear disagreement of where the market should go. I think the clearest one of all, or one of the clearest in the recent years, it's definitely the long range, very boring range we had in 2024. Remember, where I mean, investors didn't know what the heck was gonna happen. You had last market all time high, at the 60s, and here it was like, is this a gigantic double top? Are we gonna fly to the moon? I don't know. We definitely ended up quite flying. And so this is a high volume node area. What this means is it's good confluence in a chart, when you say investors are gonna wiggle again here, because if we go down 55, 56, 58, as you were mentioning, Walker, well, I don't know where we're gonna end up, but it's gonna be a little bit more messier. So that's what I believe. Like, I like to see confluence, and when you draw confluence, you have definitely high confluence between 56, $58,000, and in the high ranges, well, where we fought here as well, which is pretty similar as we're doing this cycle again.
And Luca, I got a question for you. As we were talking right before we had you on, the United States is paying for this very expensive and ever increasingly expensive war. They've spent, they're saying, around 25 billion already, and now they're looking to get approval for another $200 billion to finance this war that nobody wants. That money's got to come from somewhere, which makes me think the big money printer might be going on. We've seen what has happened with big prints from the Fed in the past. If we were to see the government approve an additional $200 billion in funding to this war, what would you maybe expect to happen with Bitcoin's price as a result of that? Is that something that you think might actually help catapult the price as we just keep printing money into oblivion? Or will the market look at that as, hey, the war is going to be stretching on for a long time, and maybe we see Bitcoin kind of carry them down further as people try to stay away from what they perceive as being a risk-on asset?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I've been listening to you guys before I hopped in the show, and I very much agree, honestly, with the view that you guys were mentioning. Walker talking about the printing money. Like what I would expect, honestly, is the market generally has like two types of reactions. You got the fast crash type of reaction, and then you got the more fundamental, a little bit slower but much more powerful type of reaction. So what I would believe is that if things accelerate on that area, where the money printer would accelerate as well. I would expect, honestly, a little bit of a crash where it's cool to say cash is king. Also thinking of the dollar there, and that being actually really the bottom. Like, what I would love to see in a chart, honestly, is us just pinging again, like this area below. That for me would be a great long, honestly. The times, well, it depends on the context that we were, explaining. But if we really quickly like see the DXY, like the dollar, this is basically,
Yeah.
guys, the dollar against the rest of the currencies, and you see it in a weekly chart. Like, this is a very good weekly chart in terms of, like, you are basically trying to, like, to be honest, you're trying to have this deviation where if you come here back up, well, it's gonna be a tough dollar out there, and this could be the cash is king type of situation.
Yeah.
So you always gotta be, I think, paying attention to not only equities but also the currencies, what's going on, because at the end of the day, guys, when you see the Bitcoin chart, you're seeing the dollar appreciating or depreciating as well, so that's relevant. But definitely, at the end of the day, that means a weaker dollar, which means, a better scenario for Bitcoin.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that ultimately, like, they might be printing more money, but Bitcoin might not see the effects of that for some time. It would be unlikely to see an immediate bump just because they're printing more money.
Exactly. I believe at
Got it.
least like the macro context plays a little bit slower generally, but it's much more
Yeah,
powerful because it's fundamented,
makes sense.
Luca,
Yeah.
one more follow up on that,
Yeah.
maybe before we let you go, is just we're talking, a lot about kind of near term this year price action, but as you sort of hinted at there, some of these macro factors take longer to develop. They take longer for the effects to be really felt. Oftentimes, Bitcoin can sort of act as a barometer for global liquidity there. To quote Lynn Alden, I believe was the first one to kind of call it that barometer in that way. But I'm curious if we zoom out a little bit, look towards more of a multi-year outlook. It gets a little bit harder to predict where things are going to go when. But I see you have the monthly up there now, which is great. I mean, where do you see us heading? Let's get out past the end of this year. Let's say we're 1 full year from now or 2 years from now. We know that there's going to be liquidity injections, right? We've actually been in a period of kind of not so much liquidity being pumped into the global markets. We know that's coming. Whether it's happening gradually or suddenly remains to be seen. What's your sort of longer term, multi-year, or even, epoch-based outlook?
I mean, of course, that's what we all, would love to know. I love an answer that we had on last week's show, I believe, with Borja, on T-Bone, who said basically, it's not only that when we think of where or how high can Bitcoin go, we always think about comparing it or benchmarking it against different size markets, which makes sense, because that gives you a relative value, in terms of what numbers you can think, right? And what he said was very interesting, Yves, because he said it's not only that we're gaining along these years, we're earning more market share if you compare it, for example, against gold, but it's also that gold's market share across the world, in terms of the world, is growing a lot as well, So if you think of for example, if you say, hey, Bitcoin can be 20% of the market share of what gold is worth, for example, think that gold will be worth probably a lot more than it is worth right now as well. Does that make sense? So like when you think of those numbers, of course, I mean, we're debating against if we buy at 65 or at 58 or at 55. Like at the end of the day, man, you gotta just be patient and stack your beats. And I think like things will get a lot more interesting. I think this can be the first big wave of the second part of a bigger, bull market. So let's hope it is as well. But yeah, you gotta be patient because these couple of months for me are gonna be a little bit more noisy and more boring in the bull market terms than we may expect.
Hey, be patient and stack sats while the price is low. I think that's pretty good advice, no matter what way you cut it, Luca. And I want to thank you always for dropping in with Walker and I and lending your insights and expertise. I don't know how to read these charts, so I certainly appreciate you doing all the heavy lifting. It's always great to have you on, my friend, and hope you have an amazing weekend, Luca.
Thanks to you guys, and have an amazing end of the show. See you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, so guys, we're reaching the end of this week's show, but now we've got a special treat for you as Walker and I are going to be participating in a new segment that we call A Walk Across America. Guys, let's run the stinger and we'll explain how this is going to work. All right, I just made that last night. Very proud of it. So this is the part of the show where Walker and I are going to go over some of the craziest headlines we've seen over the past week in America and some beyond, and we're just going to jam about them because it's a funny world out there and we want to talk about it. So Walker, we're going to get started. I'll roll with the first one. You ready to do it?
Let's do it, Hank.
All right, so Walker, at the Philadelphia airport, the longest lines weren't for TSA, but for cheesesteaks, as they set a Guinness World Record with nearly 1,300 sandwiches lined up to the previous record of 500. Walker, what 1,300 cheesesteaks at the airport? Does ICE really need that many cheesesteaks? What do you make of that? Is that our tax dollars hard at work or what?
Our tax dollars are always hard at work, Hank. One thing I can say is that I think I would rather wait in line for cheesesteak than to get frisked by TSA.
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, sometimes they can be really gentle, which I don't mind. But I do like a good cheesesteak. So yeah, I feel you. I feel you. All right, let's move on to the next headline. You're up with this one.
All right. In Raleigh, North Carolina, people are now forest bathing, taking guided sessions where they walk around smelling trees, meditating, and trying to escape the chaos of the modern news cycle. So, Hank, is this a legitimate mental reset? Or are we officially at the point where people are paying to go outside and touch trees and grass?
You know, I like it. I'm here for it. It makes me feel like a Disney prince or a princess. I'm like in like an outdoor bath, and there's critters running around, and butterflies and squirrels are coming up to see me. I'm here for it. And like you've said it before on the show, we all really need to be touching grass a little more. And if it requires me to pay for it these days, then so be it. I think everybody needs to get outside a little more. What do you think?
Well, that much is certainly true. And yeah, everybody go take a moment after the show to touch some grass, in fact.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next one. And speaking of places you might or might not want to be outside, this one's happening in Florida as a hospital is suing a patient who's been living in her room for 5 months after being discharged and now refusing to leave and potentially facing removal by the sheriff. So at what point, Walker, does this stop being a hospital stay and start becoming a long-term lease? These squatters, am I right? What are you going to do with these people?
Boy, I just don't know why you'd want to stay in a hospital that long. It's like anytime I'm in a hospital, I'm like, get me out of here as fast as possible. Like, but boy, I guess if it's cheaper than your rent, then maybe it's a good option.
It's the economy today, buddy. Seriously. I mean, people rather staying at a hospital than pay rent for their own place. It kind of tells us everything we need to know.
Yeah,
Yikes.
yeah. Okay. So on to some more weirdness here, because in Las Vegas, a runaway toucan named Sam that's been flying around the city since November somehow survived months in the desert before finally flying into someone's garage and getting rescued. So, Hank, how is a tropical bird surviving in Las Vegas in Sin City longer than most tourists?
I mean, this bird sounds like a friggin' degenerate if you ask me. A toucan flying around Vegas. But if he's able to make it in Vegas longer than most of us, he must be better at the blackjack tables. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. I love to play, but I'm no good. I'm no good. Toucan Sam over here must have one of those cards that tells you the moves to make.
There you go.
Those toucans, they're smart. They're smart. Moving on. This one's actually happened outside of the United States, but I'm very emotionally invested in this. As a baby orphaned monkey named Punch, who went viral for clinging to a stuffed animal, is now ditching the plush toy, and he's starting to make real friends with other monkeys. So Walker, are we watching heartwarming personal growth here, or is this just the animal version of finally letting go of your childhood security blanket? How are you feeling about these latest Punch developments? I'm very invested.
Very bullish on it, but I'll take a different approach. I think these other monkeys just saw how viral Punch was going on social media. They wanted a piece of the action. They wanted to be part of Punch's entourage, just to pump
chasing his clout.
Exactly, just a bunch of clout chasers. Punch has got to be careful who he surrounds himself with here. You don't want just a bunch of clout chasers glomming onto you, right?
Man, I was really holding these Japanese macaques to a higher standard, but even they fall victim to the clout trap. So I get it. All right, I think we got one more. What do you got?
Back to Washington, D.C., the swamp, where First Lady Melania Trump showed up to a White House event accompanied by a humanoid robot that walked on the red carpet, greeted the room, and spoke in multiple languages. So, Hank, are we watching the future of technology unfold before our very eyes, or the beginning of robots networking better than the rest of us?
Oh boy, I think it's the beginning of robots doing everything better than us. I think not too long it's going to be flipped, and we're going to have the first robot first lady walking with a real human person. I don't know. Maybe I like where this is going. I don't really love the state of the world right now. Maybe we'd be better with an all-knowing AI robot in charge. But hey, it was a super fun visual of seeing Melania walk down that hall and this kind of robot just sauntering from side to side. I'm here for it. It's funny, but I do worry about the fate of humanity. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to have either the Terminator or Matrix movies play out in real life. We've kind of seen how that ends. That being said, if there's a humanoid house bot that can clean some floors and fold some laundry, that's not such a bad thing. As long as just don't want it to get to the next level. That's what we want to avoid, right? Let's just stop short of Terminator.
I think I'm fine with that as long as I can put a little French maid outfit to have a good time with it. I'm here for that, but those are my own personal proclivities. Maybe
sounds
that's
like you might be looking for a different kind of robot, Hank. I don't know.
Well, good thing the weekend is on its way because I've got that kind of time now. Okay. But Walker, it's been the time of my life with you this Friday, as it always is. So I want to thank you for indulging me with our fun, silly little game here. It's been a blast this Friday, and I can't wait to do it again next week, my friend.
Looking forward to it, Hank. I'm going to be with you just on Friday of next week. I will be out fishing on Thursday, but I will see you on Friday.
All right. Well, gone fishing is a legitimate excuse, so I'll let it slide. And I hope you have a good time. Catch some pike or whatever you're fishing for. I don't know, largemouth? What do you got? You're in the Midwest.
Compliments, Hank.
Compliments. Oh, you get those too, Walker. I give those to you too much already. Well, I want to thank you, Walker. Always a great time getting to jam with you and co-host here at Roxom TV. And guys and girls, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Roxom TV, Roxom TV News, Walker America, Hank at Roxom TV. We're on all your favorite platforms where you can doom scroll. And we'll see you boys and girls next week for more news. In the meantime, stay safe, stay informed, and Walker, I'll see you next week, buddy.
Take care, Hank.
Cheers, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.